Welcome to the Spent the Rent podcast. I am your host, Patty Rose. My guest today is Springfield, Oregon educator Brandon Ferguson. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So before we get started, I want to talk about a little bit of how people listening can find the podcast. Obviously, if you're listening, you already found it, but I want to tell you different options. So you can listen to the podcast in audio form on all major streaming sites, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. You can watch on Facebook and YouTube every Saturday at 10 a.m. And then you can watch the pre-recorded videos afterwards. There'll be links to all of that on my website, which is STRPOD.com. And make sure to subscribe wherever you plan to get the weekly podcast to get alerted when a new episode drops. Now you can donate to the show through Venmo, which is at SPENTtheRENT, and that helps me greatly. Or if you'd like to become a monthly sponsor, you can go to STRPOD.com, click the donations tab, and there's PayPal and Patreon. I would totally appreciate it if you would donate even a small crumb. $5 donation on Venmo would be great. What that does is it adds to the pot for advertising dollars, and I'd like to start advertising to reach a bigger audience. So thank you for that. Brandon Ferguson, Springfield, Oregon educator. Thank you so much. I wanted to have you on because I want to talk about, some of the challenges faced by teachers in 2022. You have become a friend behind the scenes, a customer at our barbershop, and you're an awesome person. You've got a great family. So I wanted to have you on a chat. So thank you for doing this.
Yeah, cool.
So let's get started. Let's talk first about your personal journey into the profession. How long have you worked as a teacher, and what motivated you to become a teacher?
So this is my seventh year. And I've kind of gone through a long journey, and this is a little personal, but that's fine. I started wanting to kind of, I've always had strong opinions and wanted to help. And when I was younger, it came off like me feeling like a know-it-all, but hopefully I've gotten over that. And I started in youth ministry, actually. And I was a volunteer youth minister for a few years. I went to a Bible college for a year. And then towards the end of that, I started to have kind of, some dogmatic issues where I was teaching stuff that I wasn't sure I entirely believed anymore. And so I thought, like, what could I do that's still like passing on some lessons that I learned to kids, and like teaching was I'm not very creative, so teaching was like the first thing that popped in my mind. And I teach history because it's still that kind of like we can learn lessons from things that have happened in the past. And that's kind of the impetus behind it. I'm not sure if it was I have a lot of questions about whether I can accurately and adequately pass on the lessons that I've learned. It's a lot more difficult than I thought it was, but that's why I'm where I am.
So now you have two kids, but you had kids after you became a teacher. Is that correct?
It was about, my son was born when I was in my master's program. So it was about the exact same time, which turns out a lot of work, two things that take a lot of effort going on at the same time.
Wow. I must've met you pretty early on in this process, because I feel like you've been coming to the barbershop about 6-7 years, something like that. So I think it was
before I had kids. It would have been, because I was going there when I was going to the U of O, and I had my son when I went over to Pacific for the master's program.
Right. So these past couple of years have been brutal for teachers. COVID-19, distance learning and mask mandates, tensions and threats of violence at school board meetings, and a continuation of the epidemic of school gun violence. Understandably, many teachers have decided that the task is too large and are leaving the profession. After all that, what is it that keeps you focused on being a great educator?
I mean, it's still that journey. Like, just because it's a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, doesn't mean that like my guiding purpose to try and do something useful for society is any different. So, yeah, it's definitely a lot of my friends and coworkers are thinking about, is it worth it anymore? And there are so many teachers leaving, a lot just like leaving the profession. My son's teacher left in the middle of the year, which was pretty rough. I don't hold anything against teachers for doing what they feel is right. But that was a tough transition. And there's a lot of my friends where I work are leaving, and some of them are thinking about going to another school, and some of them are just like over it, because it's been rough for all the reasons you mentioned.
I think that there's often there's turnover in teaching, because I'm surprisingly doing the podcast. It's amazing, and just in my personal relationships, like I just changed banks, and I was talking to the banker. She's like, I actually started out as a teacher, and a lot of people try, random, but a lot of people try they try their hand at it, and then maybe they're idealistic and they're like you're saying, it's like, I want to help the world, but then they do it and they're like, man, I don't know if I got it in me. Especially, you're going to be teaching at high school. You've been teaching at the middle school level.
Yeah.
Good luck. No, I think you're going to be great. I think that I can't even imagine. It would be very difficult. Now, my stepson is actually studying education to become a teacher right now. He's at OSU, and his graduation is going on right now from Lane for his first 2 years, his associate's degree.
Cool.
But it's such a challenge. But one of my customers, he's a teacher, and he told me it was interesting because I'll see him every 2 months, and he's like, I'll never leave. I'll keep doing it. I'm going to keep pushing along. I know I'm going to do it. The last time he came in, he's like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Wow. And I was like, oh no, and so he's young. I cut his hair through college, and then he got his student teaching job, and then his full-time gig, and he only lasted 1 year, and oof. I don't blame him, but I mean, it's the fact that he was like, you could see that it took a lot out of him to finally just cave, that he's like, I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
So now go ahead.
This is a tough year to be your first year. I mean, a first year is already so hard, but like my first year, I was able to rely on people who've been in it for a while. There were a lot of systems that were in place to help me out. We can get into it later, but like every single little system in the school had to be reworked several times over the last few years because of changing the way we were doing things. And then you'd think, okay, we're going back to normal. So we'll just do everything the way we were doing it. But it wasn't that easy, because it's been a couple of years, and people who were there running it are gone, or they're still like, we're going to do the same thing, but you have to keep your masks on. And that little thing changes so many things. You have to keep distance. We had like a seating chart for lunchrooms, which was new. And that meant that you had to have people to enforce it, which meant that those people weren't in the places they used to be. Little things like that we never really thought about, making this year so much more difficult. Bring that all back to like a first year teacher. Is supposed to be able to rely on people knowing what they're doing. But this year, the people in the schools, for the most part, were kind of like also figuring that out.
Sure. And it's just chaotic.
Yeah. So there wasn't the support for first year teachers this year that there should be.
So that was the next section I wanted to touch on, is students adjusting to in-person learning again. What are some ways that you've been able to find ways to help kids adjust?
Like that's kind of what I was getting at when I said like it's a lot harder to actually teach kids than I thought. I can like communicate what I think, but to get kids to understand it is still a mystery, and that's that sucks, because that's kind of my job, right? To get kids to understand things, and I'm still trying to figure that out. But like the transition from online totally to in-person last year was already kind of weird, because last year it was still pretty laid back. They were still doing some online when it was in hybrid mode. Some kids just like never came back, or the kids that did had needed a lot of support because they were not used to it. And then this year we said, okay, we're going back to normal. But we had a lot of kids, unfortunately, who were already kind of on the cusp, and they came back for a little bit and just couldn't hack it. And so they went back to online, or into other alternative programs. Whereas in previous years, they probably would have still struggled, but they would have been able to make it through the year.
What do you think is the biggest challenge for those types of kids? Is it Is it social anxiety? Is it fear of COVID? I mean, that there's people obviously on different sides, even the kids on the mask debate, what do you think that the major, I mean, each person is different, which adds to the challenge of being a teacher. Cause you're like, I might have this method, but it might work for this kid, but it's not going to work for this one. Yeah. Or it might be counteractive, that this method might actually, this one
100%. Yeah. Yeah, there's some kids that like if you look them straight in the eye and say it with like a stern voice, like you can do better, like that's the thing they needed to hear, right? And there's another kid who you say that to them and they will never look at you again, and they'll never do a single thing you ask them to do. So you have to kind of feel that out and use the right mode for each kid.
Did this go ahead?
No, you
did this whole. Now you're moving from the middle school level to the high school level. Did this last year have any impact on making that decision, or is it just kind of the natural progression for you? An opportunity arose, is there really not as much to it? Is literally just like, I wanted to teach at high school and here's the chance?
I applied for every high school opening that came open in town since my first year. So I've always wanted to do high school. Yeah. I taught 8th grade because that's the closest I could get to high school. It's just, there's a lot of things you need to be good at as a teacher. And some of my weak points are some of those systems that you have to be really stern on with younger kids. I'm a little bit more like content focused, like in the younger grades. If you don't know the content, that's not the end of the world. Like if you don't know everything about the Civil War, it doesn't matter, because you're like really just teaching the kids how to like behave in school. And then as it goes up, for my elementary school teachers, I know you guys are super intelligent and smart and educated on everything.
Exactly.
Please don't take that the wrong way. But you guys have to be so good at like
there's early education. There's early education and there's education. Yeah.
Yeah. That early education, they have to like figure out how to train kids to do school the right way. And that's I'm not very good at that. It's not my skill set. So, so high school is more like where I've always wanted to be. And I've been saying that to a lot of people who are talking about how many people are leaving. I love the school I'm at right now. I mean, it's got its challenges. It's maybe, the most challenging place to work in town. But I love the people I work with. There's a real family atmosphere. And I wasn't going to move for like a lateral move, in my opinion. If I was going to leave, I was going to go to a high school.
Yeah, and it's cool that you're getting your opportunity, especially staying in your hometown. Now, I mentioned before you being a parent. How does being a parent yourself affect how you approach parents of your students?
I just was talking to a parent about her kid being diagnosed with ADHD, and they're trying to figure out the right medication. And my son's got some diagnoses that we're still working through. And going through that process of like figuring out how to best support my own son has really helped me connect with other parents who are dealing with the same thing. And it makes me feel like I know how to talk about it. So that's been one really, really helpful feature. It's really weird though. You would think that like spending all your time with with kids at home, and then going to like spend time with other people's kids at work, you think I would be like really used to communicating with kids, but kids are like all human beings, but kids don't mask it as well. They're so like difficult to get inside the head of. Like, one kid operates one way, another kid operates another way, but sometimes it's the same kid. On one day you say something to them and it really motivates them and it's great. The next day you walk up to them and they, cuss you out when you say the same thing. So it's always a mystery. And working with my kids at home or kids at work, it's the same. I still don't have all the answers.
Right. Well, and I'm sure that when approaching a parent, I'm sure that it gives you some credibility, like you had said, where, you can understand and you can empathize a lot greater than before having kids. But like you had said, you've had kids your whole career, but as they grow and progress, your experience grows and progresses.
Yeah.
So it's really good. I kind of skipped it, but I want to go back and talk about when coming back to in-person learning and talk a little bit about the masks and how kids, and this is a broad question, so obviously there's multiple answers, but how did kids react to the mask mandate being lifted?
It's super weird. A lot of kids were happy to not be wearing their masks, of course. There were some, I'd say like a fifth of the kids were still pretty nervous about having their masks off because of COVID. And there's still to this day, there's a bunch that wear their masks. And some have just said, you know what, I don't feel comfortable. Others have shared with me like they've got immunocompromised people at home, and they just want to be as careful as they can. And when the mandate was lifted, actually, the kids who didn't want to wear their masks, they were going to take off their masks. I wanted to support the kids who were like nervous about it. So for the first couple of weeks, I kept my mask on, but after a little while, I've been going without it. I actually have I have two air purifiers in my room, one in each corner, and they have the UV light in it. And I keep my windows open, and the air is just circulating. And I think it's helped. I think we've been pretty good in my classroom. I haven't gotten it yet.
Yeah, it's a scary time. I mean, there's a lot of COVID out there. I tested positive for COVID. I've been public about it on social media. That on Monday, I started showing symptoms on Sunday, and it's been a roller coaster just of emotion, just being cooped up and isolating and all that stuff. And I work with the public, so not having that interaction has been tough. I didn't even know if I wanted to do this episode, but I did have the energy, and I was like, let's just go for it. But I know how I reacted. And sometimes I look back at now, being that I've actually finally tested positive for it, or finally was exposed. When the mandate was lifted, I was like, well, we should just go by what the CDC says, and I'm going to stop wearing one. I don't know where I got it. I mean, I have no idea. It could have been any. I've done some things. I did a Memorial Day barbecue. I don't want to say because I have no idea.
Right.
Where
you're pretty close to people's faces all day long.
Yeah. And I've had customers say that they just got out of isolation, and I mean, one after another. I hear it at least once a day. I just got out of isolation, so I might have to rethink the way I look at it. I'll be wearing a mask for probably at least the next 2 weeks, just to be on the safe side.
Sure.
Even past when I'm, because the CDC recommendation is that after 5 days if you are positive, 5 days after the beginning of exposure, that you can go about your business, but you need to mask up for 2 weeks. I don't know. It's pretty tough.
Yeah.
Because we don't know how much it's spreading or that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
They say that you can test positive for weeks afterwards. So and that doesn't necessarily mean that you're spreading. And I know that with normal flu, it was always kind of like 3 days, like you're not contagious anymore. I don't know if.
Yeah, I think after 5 days, you're not contagious enough for the powers that be to justify you staying at home. I think that's what it comes down to. But I would assume that if you're still testing positive, I'm not a scientist, but it sounds like that means that you've got enough of a viral load to test it on the stick you stuck up your nose, right? Which supposedly means that you could spread it to someone else. But I don't know.
Yeah, it's tough. But and there's like this, like you said, the CDC is doing what they can, but also making sure that our economy doesn't collapse and that people can actually function. Because I mean, we have a lot. I don't know. Now, one of the questions I wanted to
let me because there's like several categories of how kids reacted to that, right? There's kids that wanted to keep their masks on. There's kids that took them off. There's also kids who, like, the whole time we had the mask mandate, kept having their mask down on their chin, right? And I say, like, pull them up. And I just assumed those kids would like take their masks off when the mask mandate came. But there's a ton of kids who still, this is like just a weird social thing, who still keep their masks down, like, on their chin. And I think that there's some social anxiety about letting people see your mouth or your nose or something. Some comfort that people feel from having the mask on still, for having to wear it for so long. I'm not quite sure exactly, but there's kids still wearing masks who don't necessarily seem to be worried about COVID. They just want to wear a mask.
Yeah. There's definitely a sense of kind of disappearing a little bit when you can pull that thing up. I mean, it was such an interesting roller coaster societally to be. My mental note was Costco. You know, during the pandemic, during the shutdowns, I'm like, why is that dude wearing a mask? Then the next time I'm like, I need to get one of them masks. And then the next time I'm like, why is he not wearing a mask? And it really just changed. And it's an interesting conditioning. And I've tried to leave an open mind for some of the people that were naysayers to it all, because I know a lot of it is understandable why it's kind of questionable. Like we had just talked about with the CDC, sometimes there's some inconsistency, or maybe it's just hard to understand fully.
Right.
You know, and it's constantly evolving. But so I wanted to move on a little bit. The next question I had was societal concerns from a teacher's perspective. What is something happening in schools that people with or without kids should be much more aware of that they're not?
Yeah. So we talked about this a little before, but I've been telling my kids, especially the kids at the school that I work at, they've been through a lot. They're pretty affected. And a lot of them seem too quick to want to grow up. I keep telling them, like, enjoy your childhood. Go, like, stay the night with your friends, play too many video games, stay up late, eat too much pizza, drink too much Mountain Dew, like be a kid. And there's a lot of these kids who are just, they're getting into alcohol and drug use. There's a lot of sexual activity. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong about those things. You got all your life to do that kind of stuff. And like, as a kid, you're only going to have this time to be like immature and irresponsible once, right? These teenage years. I have so many great memories of doing stupid stuff with my friends sober. And then you can do stupid stuff with your friends not sober too. Like, there's nothing inherently wrong with that, in my opinion. But I mourn the loss of childhood for these kids is all.
Yeah. And when kids don't establish a sense of how to be sober, that's what's scary.
100%,
I mean, I know, so I struggled with addiction for a long time, and it's something that I didn't know how to have fun on a Friday night without alcohol, and that's a really scary thing. Now, so I want to touch more on that about, vaping with Juuls and with cannabis. I'm a proponent. I'm the definite supporter of the legalization and the decriminalization of marijuana. But that being said, it is if you're 21, because I think that, there's going to be a lot of things that 21 is the age, that when I think is where you're able to make those decisions. And I worry about kids. We talked off air, and you had said that there's kids in the middle school level that can go in the bathroom, or they could be outside and they can sneak a little puff off of these little tiny Juuls, and there's nothing that you can do because you can't catch them. Yeah. How rampant is it? Is it really, really, really common?
It's like, it's the kids you'd expect, and it's the kids you wouldn't expect. I mean, it's probably at least half of the students have done it at some point this year, is my guess. And that it's wild, because when I was in middle school, I'm sure some kids were doing it, but I literally had no idea what drugs were until high school. Sure. So it's a whole different mindset. And to be honest, like, there's a lot of science about using things while your brain is still developing. Some of these kids are operating just fine, and that's on one hand, that's like, hey, that's cool. You're coming to school. You're doing great in these crazy times. On the other hand, the fact that, like, these kids are so that they've used it so much that they're already at that point. Like, all my druggy friends when I worked at Pizza Hut were, operating just fine, totally high all the time, because that's how they lived their lives. Right. I don't want that for these kids.
No, it definitely limits. I mean, it's a functioning addict.
Yeah. And that's scary.
I don't care what anybody says. You can be an addict to pot. You can be. I mean, it you may not be in the gutter about it, but it still limits your growth and all that kind of stuff. And
Yeah, you can be addicted to literally anything. Addiction is just your brain craving more chemicals, right?
Right.
So if your brain wants whatever the experience that cannabis gives you, you're going to be addicted to it, and you're going to want to go and do it. You can be addicted to checking your phone whenever it dings. You can, a lot of people don't think about addiction that way, but everything can be addicting.
Let's talk about that. How is that in school?
Sure.
Phones.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is a practiced, I don't know if you could tell, but that's like a practice dialogue, because we tell kids that all the time. Like, you wanting to check your phone is an addiction. And like, some addictions are, we're addicted to food. I'm addicted to caffeine. Everybody's got addictions. And you wanting to check your phone is not inherently bad, but it's something you do have to be aware of and tell yourself sometimes, I have that feeling that I want to do this, and I'm going to tell myself, no, I'm not going to do that. That's like a really important skill for life, right? You can't always just do whatever your body or brain is telling you want to do, right? That's not a healthy way to live your life. So you have to train yourself to say, like, I really want to check my phone right now, but I know that my mom's going to be mad at me if I fail this test, and I need to take these notes so I don't fail this test, right? You have to have that kind of that thought process. Phones in school are not allowed at the school I'm at. They are sort of allowed at the high school.
They're not allowed at all, even on break?
Even on break, yeah,
wow.
Which is honestly pretty tough. And I think it's kind of a holdover from previous days. I think that, I don't want to spoil anything, but I think there is some movement toward allowing them on break or during lunch. But the idea is that we want kids to actually interface with each other, right? During lunch, and on breaks. But I think that it would be easier to keep kids off of phones in class if we say, just wait until break. There's these stupid, I don't know. I don't use Snapchat because I'm getting old now and I'm starting to get passed up by all the trends. But I guess there's like a daily streak where, or maybe it's even more frequent than daily. People use Snapchat are going to make fun of me, but kids will have, like, if you send a message or something frequently enough, then you keep your streak up. So kids will literally, they're pretty honest. They'll get their phone out. They'll do the streak on Snapchat, and I'll say, hey, phone's off and away. And they'll say, I just had to keep my streak up.
Oh yeah.
I say, I understand that, but please put your phone away.
We went camping when my stepson Ethan was 13 or 14. We went camping, and he's like, can we go to town? And and I'm like, what do you mean? And I was like, jokingly, I was like, do you need to get your streak on? And he's like, I do, but I don't want you to put it that way. So it became this inside joke. We went to the gas station in town. We were up the McKenzie. So we went into Blue River, and I go to the gas station. I'm like, hey, yeah, we're camping up here, and we just wanted to come into town so that my stepson could get his streak on. And he was just so embarrassed. I knew exactly how I was putting it, because the guy pumping the gas at that time, Snapchat was fairly new. He had no idea. He thought he meant like running around with no clothes on.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But it was pretty funny. But no, I can't even imagine. Now, I understand it's the world we live in today, accessibility from a parent to a student, having that phone during the break where they can text them or they can call them. And I think that there's good and bad to that. I think sometimes having access to your child, whether at school, is not a good thing. I think that they need to be present in what they're doing, but also our lives are so fast, and there's so much information that's shared quickly. I mean, it could be as simple as a text that says like, so-and-so is going to be the one picking you up, or however it works, those changes. And that might be the only second that parent has a chance to reach them. Yeah. And granted, they can get it after class or whatever, but I'm surprised the idea that they would be like, no phones at all. But yeah, what a challenge. I mean,
that's kind of the secret of it is like, kids, when they're being rule followers, they'll say, hey, can I text my mom real quick to let her know that I need to be picked up X, Y, or Z, or to ask if so-and-so can come over after school. And I just say, yeah, real quick. Thank you for asking, because other kids are doing it without asking. And, I'm not necessarily too mad about it. I just remind them, put them away. But I think that we want to, this is kind of the thing about teaching is you have to be, if you're going to have rules, you have to be consistent with them. Otherwise kids will think, and as parents know this too, like if you're not consistent with a rule every single time, the rule might as well not exist. And then you're having battles with kids. So like you have to figure out which rules are important enough that you're going to be consistent with it every single time, because you're going to have to like fight that battle. And if it's a battle that's not worth fighting, and you have a rule that you don't really feel like enforcing, it actually kind of diminishes your power for the rules that you do want to enforce. And I feel like phones, at least in lunchtime and like in the hallway, is starting to get to that point. Like, I don't want you using them in the classroom because you should be focused on what you're supposed to be doing. But in the hallway, there's no reason not to. Kids are, if we say off and away, your phone is literally supposed to be turned off. And a lot of times during work time, kids will like have their headphone in to listen to music while they're working. And you know what? A lot of them need that because their friends are sitting around them. And if they don't have a headphone in, they're going to be talking to their friends. Like I technically tell them you can connect it to your computer. But I know that most of them have it connected to their phones when they have it on.
Well, and it's also a harder thing to do. I mean, dealing with the Bluetooth. I mean, if you have AirPods and you have a PC computer, they don't talk to each other super well. I mean, they do. Yeah. It's just Bluetooth, but it's not as good as your setup when you have it with your phone. Anyway, we do have to move on, and this is going to be the most difficult topic, no matter what. Today, across the country, there is, I don't know, hundreds, if not thousands of March for Our Lives rallies against school violence. These rallies were started, was it 2018 or 2019, by the Parkland students at Parkland High School. And I know that it's happening here. I like that they're doing it on a Saturday, because I know that there was a lot of talk about South Eugene originally locally was doing a student walkout. Yeah, I'm sure all the schools had some, and there's a lot of opinions on that. So doing it on a Saturday, I think is a good idea, because it's teachers and parents and students can walk together, and there's no questions on if it's appropriate or not to be walking out on school and all that kind of thing. Yeah. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about school violence and the challenges faced by a teacher. I mean, one of the things that's really common today is active shooter drills. What does an average active shooter drill look like, and have those drills changed in the last couple of years?
Right when I started was I think the first year that we started doing ALICE training, which is a little different from what we used to do, which was like, hide in a corner and hope for the best. Now, and this is kind of a sore subject given what happened in Uvalde. We're trained to first, if you can evacuate, and that seems obvious. If you can't, if there's somebody out in the hallway, you got to lock the door and barricade it. Put heavy desks and bookshelves in front of it. And if that doesn't work, if an intruder gets in, we're trained to attack. We're trained to like throw stuff at them and do everything possible. Because if you just sit in a corner, that you're sitting ducks. And I'm pretty salty about the fact that teachers are trained to attack intruders. It's not given what happened in Uvalde. That's the fact that they did not, and teachers did everything possible to protect their kids. But that's a different subject. For sure. Yeah.
What do you tell your own kids about school violence? I mean, are they too young, or is it a conversation you have to have?
They're already doing the drills. They're 8 and 6. They're already talking about it. To be honest, I'm not sure the drills are worth the trauma that it can cause. And I think maybe a lot of this conversation we're having about it, it might bring it front of mind for kids who are already having issues. And I'm not an expert. I don't have any data to back this up, but it's like front of mind for kids. And when things are, on the top of someone's mind and someone is feeling like they need to act out, they're going to do the first thing they think of. And unfortunately, bringing a gun to school and shooting people up might be the first thing they're thinking of, because we talk about it nonstop.
That's what I was going to ask.
I have some pretty, my opinions on this are always evolving, and I'm not sure what the right answer is.
No. And I want that to be clear. I'm glad you said that, because you're entitled to that. Yeah. Entitled to be, in one moment, you might have a more compassionate, empathetic view. In one moment, you might be angry and bitter and hostile as a human being. Not, at work, you got to be professional, but your personal life, it's so frustrating, and it's just so frustrating when nothing's changing. Yeah. Now, you kind of talked about it, but is the threat talked about in school, both between teachers and staff, or students and staff? Or is it almost taboo to talk about casually? So like, are people like, is it kind of like saying bomb on an airplane, where you just don't want to say it while you're like, I don't know how to word that question, but
no,
is it a conversation
we're talking about it? Yeah, it is. Especially, because it's happening around the country all the time. So every time we get a news alert, we're sitting at lunch and we say, shooting in Texas today. It's constant, because we're living it, and it's, there's I'm always thinking about what it would be like in my situation, because these kids that do this, in some of the circumstances, are like the kids that me as a teacher would have had in my classroom for the entire year, right? And that I poured a lot of attention and care into. And like, I think about some kids, sometimes there's a kid who like kind of fits the exact description of somebody you should be worried about. And you contact everyone you need to contact, and they say, well, keep an eye, make sure you're watching. And if there's anything concerning, let us know. Right. And you think about it, like, what would happen if that happened? And like, from an outside perspective, that, whoever that kid is that's going in and doing that is a monster, a soulless husk, just a body walking in, shooting people up. Right. But in reality, they're like human beings who are hurting and have gone through a lot of stuff up until that point that they make that decision. You are like loving on them and caring about them and wanting them to deal with their own stuff so that they can be, a productive member of society and not fall down into this, this dark zone that these kids get into.
I think it's important. Go ahead.
I was just gonna it's like really, when you put a personal face on it, on all levels, the victims, the perpetrator, the staff, the trauma that happens for people who weren't even there. It's really emotional. It's really personal.
I think that we as a society need to try to work on our revenge attitude. What I mean? Like that we're like, I've been wronged, I will get vengeance. And right. There's superhero movies that's literally what they're all about. Yeah. There's the video games, which I'm not trying to say that that's a link, or the wrong person with anything could take it the wrong way. Right. That music or video games, but some of it's pretty. We just live in such a violent culture. Yeah. And so vengeful, and so like I refuse to be wronged.
I've been noticing a lot of bumper stickers on trucks lately that say like, keep honking, I'm reloading, that kind of stuff, or like, my AR-15 is better than your stick figure family, or like, what are you doing with your life?
And if you have a gun in your Christmas card, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Period. Right. Period. Because they need to go back and read the Bible again, because Jesus was peacefully protesting, right? He died, but like, turn the other cheek isn't so that they can slap the other one. That's literally what it's about. They're doing it wrong. Literally. They're doing it wrong. Yeah. And
supposed to be beating their swords into plowshares, right?
And I think sometimes, on the flip side, I don't want to get political, but on the flip side, it's like, sometimes you have to be able to just roll your eyes and walk away from certain things, because yes, we need to fight, and yes, we need to stand up against this type of stuff, but we also have to not give it oxygen sometimes. And it's a balance that's really difficult. I know that me and you are very vocal on social media about our political leanings and things. And sometimes I think it's best if we just lower the temperature. You know what I mean? Like, and I've noticed that you're hilarious on Twitter, you know, and
oh wait, shoot. Do you follow me on Twitter?
I think so. A radical dude or something. Yeah.
So, can you no, honestly, could you bleep that?
Yeah.
That's where I go to, you know, say all my things.
Well, I don't know if
I don't put it on Twitter anymore.
It's longer than that. It's longer than that. That's not the whole thing. But anyway, so God, it's just, I just feel like we need to lower the temperature, you know, and so I you know, I don't know. I worry about that. But yeah, that was a question I wanted to ask is the tension around the topic so much that people don't talk about it in schools, or if it's taboo so much that people don't talk about it casually, like I had said, kind of like saying bomb on an airplane. But it sounds like people are very much so discussing it. You know, in Thurston High School, my sophomore year, I was at Springfield, was when the Thurston shooting happened. And I felt like afterwards it was a little bit taboo to talk about in school because people weren't really ready to have the conversation. Well, hopefully that's what's changed. Hopefully we're ready to have the conversation. And I don't know if it's going to lead to just swift changes, but I think at least if we're having the conversation, some changes will happen. We've seen it, in my opinion, with racism, that there's still a lot of people that are unwilling to have the conversation, but there's a lot that are willing to have it, you know? And so we're making some progress there. And that's a whole different issue that we could be here for days talking about in the education system. Cause I know that in 8th grade, you haven't been teaching critical race theory, like what people want to push, but we could be here forever. Brandon Ferguson, thank you so much. Thank you for the work that you do as an educator and a teacher in our community. I think that I think you're going to do great at the high school level. I'm proud of you for sticking to it. I'm also proud that I'm happy to hear that this is something you dreamed about, being at the high school level, and that it's happening. Yeah. And I think that, you know, now you'll work there for hopefully the rest of your career in one school. One of the things I've been telling my stepson why I think teaching is a great profession for him is I think that it gives him a community to be involved with, because even like you, he wants to teach history, but I could see him going to band recitals and choir concerts and plays and things that are unrelated to what he does, but he's a part of it, you know? And I think that it means a lot to the student that they're like, that's my art teacher, that's my band teacher at a different event, because it shows that there's this communal feeling. And I think that alone, as long as we make sure not to leave people behind, I think that that's one of the best ways that we can combat some of that, violence and all that stuff, is make sure that everybody's included. Yeah. And that, you know, we're part of something bigger. So thank you so much, Brandon. I appreciate the work you do. And we're going to get out of here.